The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Alrighty, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for today's webinar. It's a pre-summit webinar featuring Kyle Danner. He is with Kyle Danner Solutions for Family Businesses. I'm going to give a brief introduction to Kyle in a little bit, just a few housekeeping notes from myself. First off, my name is Drew English. I'm the program coordinator here at the Exit Planning Institute. These webinars are meant for everyone to kind of get a little insight on who's going to all be in attendance at our summit in September in Nashville, Tennessee. Our international summit is each year. This year is September 24th and 25th in Nashville, Tennessee. If you're looking for some information on that, you can either reach out to me directly or you can visit exitplanningconference.com. On there has the agenda, all the speakers and the topics and summaries, and logistically everything you need to know for the conference. So if you're not registered for the conference and you're still considering it, we still do have open registration. Definitely recommend looking into that and then letting either myself know or Josh Koza here at EPI Global. So for today, we have Kyle Danner here, who's going to kind of talk to us about family business and building a peak performing family business. Just a little background on Kyle. He helps prepare business owners for the next generation of leaders and their advisors, so everyone is confident about the future of their family and their business. Kyle knows what it's like to grow up in a family business as well as to own one. He also understands how overwhelming it can be to start a new chapter after exiting the family business. So that's why he offers solutions to family businesses in addition to their advisors. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Kyle here. The webinar is being recorded, so I will send the recording out later. And if you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and type those in the questions panel on your drop-down menu of GoToWebinar on the side of the screen, so I can then relay those to Kyle. But with that, Kyle, I'll turn it over to you, and we can get going for today.
Well, great. Drew, thanks for the introduction, and thank you, everyone, for joining. Today, I'm super excited to be part of this year's Exit Planning Summit in Nashville. And this will be the first time I'm exhibiting at the conference. And so if you are there, please come up, introduce yourself. Would love to get to know more about what you're doing in your business. Now, of course, there is more than we can cover in the next 30 minutes today. And so what I've done is I've kind of put together an ebook of some additional information, some exercises, things that you can use. If you're interested, send me an email at kyle@kyledanner.com and just put in the subject line, send me your stuff. And I will shoot that out to you this afternoon. As Drew kind of alluded to, this is something that's very personal to me. So I started working in the family business when I was 4 years old. And my dad had a courier service. And so I would sit next to him in the truck as a little kid as we may pick up some deliveries. And I continued working in our family's various businesses since I was that little kid. And I joined full-time after college. And by then, it was a printing company that my brother and my sister owned. Now, my intention was to stay 1 year, but 1 year turned into 17 years. And during that time, we took that company and we grew it to be the 5th largest printing company in Kansas City. Well, folks, sorry about that. Let me restart my PowerPoint. Not sure what happened there. So there I am, cute little kid. But during that 17 years in which I was working and owning a business with my family, we took that company and we grew it to be the 5th largest printing company in Kansas City. And it was great. We enjoyed a lot of success, had some really nice rewards. But in 2009, the handwriting was on the wall because the business had grown in a direction or kind of had outgrown my skill set. And what it really didn't make sense for me to try and get those new skills. It didn't make sense for us to hire somebody and then make a place for me elsewhere in the business. What really made the most sense was for me to step aside and pursue something that was more to my talents and energies while the business could get what it needed to keep moving and growing. So I sold my interests and I left. I went back to school for a master's in counseling. And during that time, I came across this field called family business advising, to where you really work with not only just the business piece of it, but also the family piece of it. And really that's where my strengths lie. So what I do today is I take that personal experience of growing up in a family business, building and owning a business with my family, and then my professional education, which includes that master's degree in counseling and my ongoing training, like the CEPA designation. And what I do is I help prepare families for what's next. That includes building the family team, that's helping get the next generation of leaders ready, and it also involves supporting advisors like you all in your work with family businesses. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to start today kind of where I start with all my clients when I start working with them. And it's the opening question. When were you last at your best in the family business? Now, if you're an advisor, I would think reframe this question. So when were you last at your best in your work? And I'm referring to those times where either maybe you're working with your team and solving a problem, maybe something to do with a production line, or maybe a customer challenge, or maybe you're somebody who prefers to be nose deep in reports, trying to determine if you're profitable for the quarter, or if you're meeting your KPIs, or if you're somebody who really enjoys the challenge of sales and closing a deal with a customer. But whatever that situation is, it's really about where you are just completely immersed in the work. You kind of lose track of time. You're not distracted by what's going on around you. Simply put, you were in the zone. And most importantly, is that when you were kind of done with that, you didn't feel drained. And in fact, you felt energized, you felt ready to take on the next thing. So as you think about answering that question, keep that in mind as we move forward today. Now, in working with family businesses, building on my own experience and the work I do with my clients, I've kind of come up with 5 keys that I use to kind of guide my thinking when I am working with a family business. And the first is to know yourself, to know your family, to think big picture, to build value, which is CEPAs we're really familiar with. Folks, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what's happening today. Technology is great when it works. Build value, and then to take the long view. And in this, know yourself. Yes, this is all about family business, but really it starts with you. It starts with you knowing, why are you in the business in the first place? And does being in business align with your personal goals and what it is that you want out of your own life for yourself? And then it's knowing about what strengths that you have and how they will benefit the family and the business. And that's why I start with that opening question. When were you last at your best in the family business? Because you can draw on that experience to really kind of best determine where your place is in the exit planning process, or in a growth phase of the company, or maybe if it's even time for you to think about stepping out of the business and moving on to something else. Now, just as important as for you to know your family or to know yourself, it's also important to know your family. And I'm talking about your family story, not just as it is now, but also the history of your family. And how does your family solve its problems and manage its differences? And that's just kind of a nice consultant-y way of saying fight and argue. That is, how does your family kind of fight and argue amongst itself? And just as important as it is for you to know your own strengths, but what's it your family strengths that they bring to the table? That is, that mom and dad, maybe it's an uncle and aunt involved, or your brothers and sisters in the business. That is, how can they bring their strengths to the table and best benefit the business? And of course, we know from CEPA training that family business really is made up of kind of 3 circles. family, business, and ownership. And we also know that what the priorities for each of those circles are, the relationships and the rules that are involved, they all create this natural tension that is very familiar and very common in family business. Put another way, family business is really about balancing the heart with the checkbook. And of course, as I said before, building value, we know that really well as CEPAs, and that building value is all about building a business that's transferable, whether it's to the next generation or maybe to an outside buyer. And a key part of that is managing the 4 C's, the 4 different kinds of capital: human, customer, structure, and social. And we'll dive into that a little bit more in a few minutes. And then finally, when we think about family business, we have to think about taking the long view. That is that most family businesses are closely held. That means they're not necessarily subject to the whims of outside shareholders. That a lot of times family businesses think about in terms of generations or life events like births, weddings, and deaths. And then also that gives them the ability to invest for the long term, meaning that their resources that they invest today, it may be a while before they actually realize the return, which in many ways can give them a competitive advantage over those other businesses in the marketplace. Sorry, folks, thought I advanced there. So our 5 keys are to know yourself, to know your family, to think big picture, to build value, and take the long view. Now, for our purposes today, we're really going to dive into these 3 here. And where I'd like to go next is to talk about the value building piece, because this is kind of the foundation for what we're going to talk about in building a peak performing family business. And in Walking to Destiny, Chris Snyder writes that what makes a brand valuable comes down to the strengths of the 4 C's. And if you'll remember this handy diagram that we learned in our CEPA training, that where the value acceleration methodology really works and where we can really deliver our value is in the intangibles. That is, those 4 C's, the human, customer, structure, and social capital. Now, when we think about the human capital, a lot of times we think about within the context of the business. And Chris writes about it being the leadership and the management team that's within the business. Well, I would encourage you to expand the notion to include, for human capital, to include the family. Because the family influences what happens in the business, and it influences what the decisions are made. And people who are not even active in the business can play an influencing role. Plus, the wealth the business generates, it feeds the family. And I'm not just talking about the food and shelter and clothing. I'm talking about things like paying for education, family trips and fun, weddings and other life events, the challenges of elder care that so many business owners and baby boomers are having to manage now, as well as think about their own retirement, and yes, even the kids' inheritance. And we also know that it's important to think about including the family, because in last year's State of Owner Readiness surveys, up to 81% of those companies surveyed were either family-owned or family-controlled. And we also know, as Chris writes, is that developing that human capital needs to be the #1 priority. It's also probably your biggest headache. And it's becoming an even bigger headache for business owners, considering the challenges of a tight labor market and the competition for good, qualified team members. Of course, the question is, how do you do that? How do you start? And especially when I'm saying not only should human capital include your management team, but really it should also include the family or start with the family. And let's be honest, family business doesn't always have the best reputation. Personally, whenever I shared working with family at a cocktail party or networking event, I always, without a doubt or without fail, I would hear, oh, I could never work with my family. And then I'd hear all the ways how their family was so dysfunctional. For the record, though, is I have yet to meet a functional family. Yet, irony is that forming a business with family is the most common way to organize a business. Think for a minute how many family businesses you come in contact on a daily basis. Restaurants, bars, dry cleaners, roofing and remodeling companies and manufacturing firms. So the question is, how do you do this? You do this, first of all, by your PowerPoint crashing on you. Oh, let's see. Where are we at here? We start off with the opening question. When were you last at your best in the family business? And often when we think we are at our best, we think about using it working to our strengths, those things that we're good at, but it's more than that. So what I'd like to share with you today is an upgraded approach to this whole notion of strengths. It's brought to you by an organization called Strengthscope, of which I'm a practitioner. And usually when we think about strengths, we think about those abilities, those skills, those talents, those things that we're good at. But what I encourage you to also do is think about those things that energize you, those things that you're intrinsically motivated or drawn to doing. Because consider this, if you think about those things that you're good at, is there something that you're especially skilled at, but that if you looked at the entire day of having to do that one thing, you wouldn't find it necessarily energizing, you wouldn't find it necessarily motivating. And so instead, what I would encourage you to do is to think about and expand your notion of strengths to include also those things that intrinsically motivate you, that put you into that zone that I was mentioning before. Because when you combine these two together, really what we're looking for is that area of sustainable peak performance. And the most important thing is that when you're done, you don't feel drained, but you feel energized, ready to take on the next thing. Of course, how do you figure this out? Strengthscope offers a standard assessment. And what it is, it's an online survey with 175 questions. Takes usually about 20 to 30 minutes to complete. It measures 24 strengths, which are included in the eBook that I'll send out if you're interested in receiving that. And the thing that's really nice is that the results are shown graphically in this strength wheel, which I'll go into in a little bit. But the big question is, why use this approach for family business? Well, like many of you, I work with entrepreneurs and business owners, and they want to know what can they do today to move their business forward. And one of the challenges that I see repeatedly is that owners know they have to invest in developing their team, but they're usually afraid to pull the trigger because it's really difficult for them to measure that ROI. It's the most important thing they need to be spending on, but the thing is, it's also what has the biggest question mark. And so the challenge is that for many owners and families is that, at least what I found, is that they're unfamiliar with the various types of assessments and what they can deliver. And quite honestly, we were the same way in my own family's business. And here's why I like this approach. As a former business owner, and as somebody who was always kind of scratching my head about how to solve this problem, there's reasons why I really like this approach. One, it's simple. There's no new language to learn, there's no new terms to learn or anything like that. It can be easily grasped. And here's the thing that I really like about it is that it focuses on work and not personality. It's not about whether you're an introvert or extrovert, or if you're assertive or aggressive, and it doesn't label individuals like a lot of some of the other assessments do. It also fits neatly into existing processes, because if you already have a very detailed planning process, and the place where you're kind of scratching your head is, where do I put people? Here you can figure out where they're really good at, what energizes them, and then place them in the appropriate roles. And the real focus is all about teamwork and collaboration, which we know is becoming more and more of a demand in today's complicated workforce. And the really big reason when it comes to family business is that it takes the edge off conflict. And remember, we know that's especially important because up to 81% of the businesses surveyed last year in the State of Owner Readiness surveys, they were family owned. What's nice about this, first of all, is it's reporting from an objective third party. It's not coming from mom and dad. It's coming from somebody else. So it already removes some of that family dynamic. It also starts from a place with what's right, not what's wrong. So we're already starting from a positive orientation. And we are focusing on behavior. As I mentioned in the previous slide, we're taking that piece out of personality and we're focusing on behavior because we can manage to behavior. And we're starting to learn not only what energizes and drains others as well as us. So we start to understand why sometimes dad, who's really big on making decisions now and taking action now, why there might be some conflict with his son or daughter who is more collaborative in nature, who wants to work with a team and take a little bit more time to make decisions. And so we start understanding why that conflict takes place in the first place. And the really nice thing about this is that you can take the individual reports that are done by members of the family or members of the management team and roll them up into a comprehensive team report. So how do we apply this, or what does this look like so that you have a better idea? So in the ebook, you'll see there's an exercise here and you'll see the list of 24 strengths. And you're able to spend a little bit of time thinking about when were you last at your best in the family business. Spend a little time writing what that was look like. And then what strengths did you experience in that moment? So while there's the online assessment, at least you get an opportunity to kind of read through the strengths, see what's available and what you most likely might align with. And then of course, the question is, when were you last not at your best in the family business? And trying to understand, well, when things go wrong, is it because maybe you're in the wrong position, you're not using your strengths, or whatever the case may be? And of course, just as important is to think about know your family, or I'm sorry, this is an example of the Strengthscope wheel applied. This is actually my Strengthscope wheel. And in my family business, I was responsible for project management, which really was in the execution area. And as you can see by the length and this, of the bars, it wasn't my strongest area. Rather, I'm much better in strategic thinking and relational, that is building relationships with others. So when I first saw this, took this about 9 months ago, it really clicked for me why sometimes I wasn't in the best position in the family business. And of course, you would apply the same thing to your family, thinking about when they were not at their best, or when they were at their best. Of course, there is kind of a challenge and when you start thinking about working with your family, or thinking about when your family is at its best, because then it's being able to, since you have known these folks since either they were born or you were born, everything is so habitual. We're so used to the way that everybody acts and behaves that being able to step back and really get some objectivity is a real challenge. This assessment is one way in which helps you get a little bit more of that objectivity. Of course, what we didn't cover is while it's great to think about working to your strengths, we did get into things about strengths in overdrive, dealing with drainers. That is, we know that while it's great to think about always working to our strengths, that sometimes in small business we have to bootstrap and we have to do those things. So how can we do them effectively, as well as using your strengths in relationships with others, and a lot more. So just a review of what's in the ebook before we wrap up. There's the list of the 24 strengths. There's the worksheets to know yourself and to know your family, along with some reflection questions. There's an exercise designed either for family business owners and advisors to see about how to begin the conversation. And then also, there's also a link that I'll talk to about a new ebook that I just published this month. But if you're interested in learning more about this, an offer to the EPI community is to take the Strengthscope Standard Assessment and receive a 1-hour strength session with me. We'll do it via Zoom or online for $125. And this way you can kind of start to see how you can apply it in your own work or work with your clients. And then finally, one of the things that I do is I help and support advisors, as well as owners and next generation leaders. And so I've taken content that I prepared before and presented it for EPI. Is there an elephant in the family business? If you want, you can download a free chapter at kyledanner.com. And there is one specifically there for advisors on how to start the conversation and keep the conversation going around those difficult topics. So we just have a couple minutes left today. Drew, I don't know if there are any questions that people have.
Yeah, we had a few questions come in. Again, if there's anyone still online here that would like to ask a question, go ahead and please type that in the question box on the drop-down menu of your GoToWebinar panel there. Kyle, one question that came in. What's one piece of advice that you would offer exit planners working with family businesses?
The thing that I really suggest is to be able to kind of manage your own reaction. Because here's the thing with family businesses, it's really good. A lot of times when we're working with another family business, we get reminded about other relationships that are present in the business. So for example, if your little brother always annoyed you, and you find yourself working in a family business, and you have a family member who you just can't connect with, or they're just kind of triggering some of that history that you've had in your own family, it's always good to maybe check that relationship and to think about, well, wait a minute, is this reminding me of anybody in my own family? And to spend a little time thinking about that, because then what that can do is give you a little bit of insight in how to manage yourself in that relationship, so you don't end up either ignoring or ostracizing or pushing that person away, which could essentially, derail your engagement with the business. And so that would be one piece of advice that I'd offer.
Perfect. Second question, if you come across a situation where you're working with a family and one of the family members that's working in the business just doesn't seem like it's the best place for them, how would you approach that?
First of all, I would see fit. Are they in the right position in the first place? Because a lot of times what happens is in a family business or in a small business, something needs to be done. We have a warm body. Let's put them in charge of it. Now, that may be necessary in a startup phase or growth phase, or maybe if you're having to fill in, but that really should not be kind of the standard operating practice. You really want to make sure that the person is in the right place. And that's one of the reasons why I really like the Strengthscope assessment, is that it's one way to figure out whether or not you have a fit. If it's just not the place for them, then I would strongly suggest figure out how can you develop an exit plan for them to leave the business in a good spot, and in such a way that they don't feel like they're pushed out, but that they have a path forward. And just as important, that once they exit, that they're still very much a part of the family. And so that would mean, like, for example, family holidays and family get-togethers aren't dominated by business conversation, which can really end up ostracizing and having people who are not involved in the business feel cut off. So then it's thinking about a bigger picture about, well, how do we continue building the family without letting the business take over, so those folks who are not active in the business still feel very much a part of what's happening in the family.
Fantastic.
But and that's always a touchy subject too, because no one, especially for parents who maybe have an investment in thinking about their kids taking on the business, and it's just not a good fit for whatever reason, that can be especially painful. So we really want to think about a way in which they can exit the business well and still be in touch with the family.
That's a great point, Kyle. Thank you. And then the final question that came through here is, do you work only with family businesses?
No, I don't. What's funny is the first 3 businesses I started working with at the beginning of the year were not family owned, but they were businesses that needed exit planning assistance. And so I certainly work with them. A lot of times I'll start working with the family and then start working with the management team if it makes sense. So I'm pretty flexible in how I work with folks. So.
Perfect. Well, again, if there's any additional questions that anyone would like to add offline, you could either reach directly out to Kyle or myself. I'll be more than happy to field those questions and get those over to Kyle for an answer for you. Or if you wanted to talk to him in person, he will be at our summit in Nashville, Tennessee at the end of September 24th and 25th. And like I said earlier, if you're looking for additional information on that, please visit exitplanningconference.com or give a call or an email to either myself or Josh Koza here at EPI Global. But with that, we'll go ahead and start concluding the webinar here. It was being recorded, so I will send out the recording clip to you all later today. And then, Kyle, is there anything you would like to add before we conclude?
Nope. I hope to see you all in Nashville and looking forward to the conference.
Perfect. Thank you, Kyle, for spending some time with us, going through and kind of giving us a little glimpse of what you do. Hopefully everyone can get a chance to talk to Kyle live down in Nashville. And with that, we'll go ahead and get everyone back into their busy day. Hope everyone has a good rest of the day, good rest of the week. And if there's anything I can do in the meantime, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd be more than happy to help. So perfect. Kyle, thank you very much. We'll all talk soon.
Great. Thanks, Drew.